All right. I think we're live here. Welcome back to another edition of the Perception Action Journal Club. I'll quote Marianne as she just said, we're finally into the good stuff in this book. All right. We're right into the heart of, we're reviewing, for those of the first time, we're reviewing Michael Turvey's book, Lectures on Perception. We've gone through long, sometimes very difficult chapters on kind of traditional approach to perception. And now we're into the ecological approach. And we're really getting into it today.
Chapters on the ecological approach now.
yeah, they're kind of they're the same format, but at least they're talking about direct perception and ecological optics and things like that. So
I didn't have to look up quite so many words this time.
Yes, you've heard these ones before. That's good.
Yes.
Yeah, so we're doing lecture 22 and 23.
Yep.
Ontology at the ecological scale. So this is and then ecological optics. So I think I think he does a good job connecting with the other chapters.
Yes. There's some payoff for a lot of things finally.
Yeah. There's some payoff for things you learn.
Is it worth
talking
about what ontology is? I know he kind of starts there, doesn't he?
Yes. Oh, hang on 1 second. Rob is freezing up.
They move his quote Turvey with environment duality quotes. To perceive things is to perceive how to get about among them and what to do or not to do with them.
All right. You froze up a little there, so I'm not quite sure what
happened. And the idea of horns. Oh, okay. Am I still going?
Yeah, it froze up.
Is that better?
The audio is unsynced.
Can you do what you did last time?
Let me try.
He's abandoned us again.
I'm trying to come. Okay. Is that any better?
That's much better so far.
So far, so good.
So far for a couple seconds. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what's... Okay. We'll play it by ear. Okay. So lecture 22. You want to...
Ontology.
Yes. On your ontology is your bread and butter. And do you want... What did you pick?
Go on.
Ontology is a big scary word, I think. But
so look, ontology at an ecological scale, right? This is a really important chapter because he's really setting up about really key stuff. So by ontology, he means one of a couple of different things. And I think he explicitly even says this at one point, where one issue around ontology is your theory of what things are and what kinds of things exist, right? And that's kind of where we're at this point. We're setting
what's real and exists.
And the problem is that in order for ecological psychology to get off the ground, we need a theory of the kinds of things that are real and exist that allow things like affordances and specifying information to be options. And the whole point of the previous books is that the Cartesian ontology does not have any space for those things, which is fine, except for the fact that it's because it's the kind of ontology that doesn't have space for those kinds of things, those impredicative things, all those relational things. Because it doesn't have space for them, that's the source of the problem that we run into again and again and again. Basically, the point of the rest of the book is that the Cartesian ontology, the theory of what's available, what you're allowed to build your organism out of, doesn't contain the right kind of pieces. None of it works, right? Mm-hmm.
And he starts some of that, doesn't he, with the idea that historically people have only been interested in understanding Homo sapiens, usually adults. And so there's a mind, they're focused on, that and not the environment, not other organisms. And that's then when he gets into the dualisms and so the starting point, which we picked up and is drip fed all the way through each chapter, really, hasn't it?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So
Mhm.
a lot of these things like mind-body dualism sort of they fall out of just thinking about, well, I can sit and have interesting philosophical thoughts in my armchair. How could we possibly explain that? And they're trying to build a theory of that rather than a theory of how I successfully got to the armchair in the first place and knew that I could sit in it, right? Which is what everybody knows how to do, right? That's what all organisms effectively know how to do within their own niches. And yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and then he moves from
Yeah.
the mind-body dualism to we're going to talk about an organism in an environment instead of a
Yeah.
mind in a body.
Yes. So he draws a distinction
Mixes
then.
from-
Sorry, Rob.
Yeah, from dualism to duality.
Yes.
Separable. He's dismissing the idea there's separable things you can study in isolation to
Yeah.
things that
Yeah.
are reciprocal and intrinsically related to each other. You can't break it apart.
Yeah, same kind of things, mutually compatible, mutually complementary.
Space, time, all of those.
Yeah.
I like that whole section.
Well,
Yeah.
Well, just a historical note, right? This all the duality stuff. This goes back to like the papers in the late 70s and early 80s. Turvey and Shaw and Mace. So Bob Shaw and Bill Mace. Shaw in particular, just historically, was one of the guys who was really developing this duality kind of idea, really trying, and this, we have this slogan, right, that the unit of analysis is the organism environment system, and what that and that's the slogan. But sitting at the bottom of that slogan is this notion of a duality. And one of the things that Shaw and Turvey and the rest of that gang were doing in the early 80s was getting really philosophically serious about the idea that duality is at the heart and that things have these duals, right? Affordances have effectivities and vice versa, and that these duals are utterly critical to what's going on. So, yeah, so like, there are some famous, and I remember when I was a grad student, Jeff tried to get me to read some of these things, and I did try to read some of them, and they are not for the, like, if this is tough. Those papers are not for the faint of heart. But again, they were doing big work, right? And so anyway, this is coming out of and sitting on top of a whole bunch of stuff that was going on in the 80s, right?
Yeah. And this is preceding the most famous duality, Gibson's perception action, right?
Absolutely.
They're not separable. Can't study them by themselves, right? That's the big move he's going to make. Yeah, I enjoy the space time. The space time, I read those papers you mentioned too. I think for me, this is part of the problem. We have so much trouble explaining things like the role of memory, right?
Yes.
Because ecological psychology completely changes. Like there's no past and present in the same way that we think. Like time is not a separable thing that you can look at by itself. It's a relationship. So it's very hard to explain. You need to change the way you think is the answer about those ideas. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, it's a duality nested in time, isn't it? I like the way he talk about there are the things and there's change. There aren't things and changes. There are changing things.
Yes,
it was one of them. Yes, and so and like you said, the idea. Yeah.
Yeah.
And because that was a big part of Cartesian physics, right? That space is this container that doesn't itself have properties, but simply contains things that have properties. But that ecologically, that's from at the scale of us, that's an incoherent idea.
Yeah.
Right.
And space and things, because there can't be space is the gap between things, and things can't be separated from space. I just loved that whole section. It was really good.
Yeah.
Well, this is like Gibson's whole move of going away from space perception and talking about his ground theory. It's not, we don't perceive space, we perceive things, and space is the relations between those things, right? Like what a he spends a lot of time talking about that in the 79 book. Why? Because it's really important and it's really different from everything that came before.
Yes. Yeah. Space and time are traditionally they're independent constructs we use to understand other things.
Yeah.
And Gibson's part is they're part of the right. They're part of the things we're trying to understand. Right.
Yeah.
The relationship. Yeah.
Am I jumping too far on that? I might be on the measurement bit. I haven't got the note because I've got it on. Obviously, it's on mentally. I chuckled when he talked about the fact that organisms have been, for example, perceiving space between things for like millennia, and we invent a ruler and then decide that the ruler's right.
Yes.
An organism's perception must be the one that's wrong, rather than okay if they're different. And also that idea, I think I might have jumped forward, so I'm sorry, but the idea of going to measure something in like a distance. We're all familiar with things like the problem of measuring a coastline because it changes every time you change the length of the ruler. How would an organism be able to move around space and have that time to contact with that concept of units of measurement? That was the first thing that I thought. Yeah. So you'd almost straight away say, no, that's not going to work.
Yeah, measurement's going to become is.
I think that's the next chapter a bit more.
It's the ecological optics stuff, but measurement. This is the other thing to remember.
Measurement was part of it. What's real and what isn't.
Well, perception is an active measurement, right? Perception is measuring the environment, and the question is, what is the ruler that defines the scale of that measurement?
Yeah.
And it's not the centimeter ruler. For reaching to grasping, it's the hand. For throwing,
this thing. Yeah.
For locomotion, it's something else. For sitting on a chair, it's something else, right? The thing is, we are many rulers, right? And this is Rinson's smart perceptual device kind of idea. This is the notion of so the notion of measurement. When we get into the ecological optics bit, the remembering that this is measurement and that measurements come with scales, and that not all measurement systems are the same kind of system that's
and we need to think about ecological scales. That was in that chapter, wasn't it? This idea of ecological scales. And then I think then he moved on into the like what is in and what is out. And again, it went back to the animals, and even was it a fibroblast, and the fact that their behavior is prospective and intentional, and there's lots of decision making in that. I don't know if that's worth exploring.
As usual, Turvey finds a example out of somewhere out of nowhere. You're like, wow,
which I like. That goes back to the things that I'm interested in.
For sure.
And I get just quickly on that. Actually, one of the things that it made me think about, and I know he does talk about von Opfax, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but this idea of Umwelt, which I am really familiar with from animal studies, and it did make me think a little bit what is really nice for me in some ways. So Umwelt from that I've always understood it is an organism's perspective of the world based on its sensory qualities and what it can do, which gets really close to affordances. And this is a couple of hundred years earlier, isn't it? So he's leading into some of that. And then I'm thinking, I know that from somewhere else. But I was thinking, it's interesting that that these, and I guess this is historically understanding animals and understanding babies, which are two places that there's a lot of into this, weren't connected, were they? They were just completely different fields.
Yeah. So one of the worries about that kind of Umwelt kind of idea is that it makes everything subjective, right?
Oh yeah, no, I get that. I just think
but this is one of the things. And that concern only comes up if you're a Cartesian. Basically.
Yes. I was going. Yes.
Right. Yeah. And so as soon as you are talking about dualities, as soon as you're talking about complementarity, as soon as you're talking about organism environment systems, the whole thing hangs together. And so Turvey has a section in this chapter where he calls affordances a lawfully benign relativism. And what he's talking about there is the fact that there is that sense of everything's relative to the organism, but it's not. But it's not the beginning of a slippery slope into everything being subjective and made up. It's a perfectly benign form of this, right? Because it's grounded in laws and so on and so forth. And so,
isn't that Gibson has a quote? Yeah. Things are subjective and objective at the same time. Isn't that Gibson's thing? Yeah.
Well, yeah, and it's just that subjective and objective are just the wrong words, right? It's just we're doing something else. But no, you're right, Marianne. All that stuff is so key, and the idea was absolutely floating around. But from the Cartesian point of view, if everything's relative, that's that's where you get sort of idealism kind of philosophies where everything's invented, right? It's hard to see how to be a realist under those terms. But what Gibson is here's how you be a realist and stick to that fairly straightforward truth that the embodiment of an organism completely structures how it interacts with its environment and engages with it. Yeah.
Is it worth? I don't know how much people listening will know. But from what my and I've come straight out of work into this. He then talked about actually what affordances were, and there was almost like a formula from the Turvey et al. Paper about affordances being in an environment, a place and time, and then went on to talk about our organisms relational or what's the other word? Brain.
Dispositional.
Yeah. Are those is that worth exploring then? Kind of like what an affordance is, and then I know the relational dispositional affordance thing is still a bit of a some people.
May I take this one?
Yes, please. I think it's
so. Right. There's a few things going on here. So, right, we're in the chapter Ontology on the Ecological Scale. And so he's laying out the kinds of things, drawing from previous lectures and all that sort of stuff. He's kind of pointing to the things that an ecological ontology needs to have in them. And the practical upshot of all of those considerations is that the ecological ontology is best represented, ironically, but best represented, the best exemplar of what it means to be the ecological ontology is affordances. Affordances are the ecological ontology, right? They are the thing that is real, that is relevant, that is perceived, that is the object of perception. And also they're the kind of thing that has the kind of thing that they are only is possible within a certain ontological framework. So what affordances are and how they work is a manifestation of the ecological ontology. So that's the first thing to know. Then the second thing is around, right. So I thought this was quite amusing in some ways because, right, there's a big argument that's been going on for 1 million years in the ecological community about how best to formalize what sort of thing affordances are, how to formally describe the ecological ontology. And Turvey and others in a few papers proposed that this dispositional ontology, effectively that affordances are best considered as these dispositional properties of the environment that are complemented by dispositional properties of the organism. And that's the duality, and the dispositions provide that duality. And we call the ones in the environment affordances, and we call the ones in the organism effectivities, but that's just the names that we give them. The other account is to frame them instead as that affordances are relations, that they are not in the environment or in the organism, but they're in the organism environment system. They're at that scale of activity. And there's lots of reasons for doing this. And one of the main motivations is that if you do affordances as dispositions, you can start telling pretty coherent stories about perception action and perceptual control of this, that, and the other. But it's hard to tell stories about memory or imagining or all the other things that people want to study. So one of the ways to expand the notion of affordances is to make them relations, because relations, the relational version of the ontology has space to talk about all of these kinds of things. Well, it has space to talk about them. Whether or not it has space to actually come up with an explanation of them is the argument, right? Mm-hmm. Turvey does not engage with that specific form of the argument whatsoever, actually. He simply actually lays down his cards and says they are dispositions, and then gets into the nitty-gritty detail of what he means by that. But then he's got the section, the dispositional and the relational. Dispositions have a relational quality to them. Disposition. He points to a quote by Reid saying that affordances aren't relations in and of themselves, but they become relations when they are used. And the way I would think of that, and the way I've always explained that, is that, the affordance is the disposition, and the relational work that people talk about being necessary is necessary, but it's done by the perception action loop, right? And so Turvey just basically says, and just in a very, I think, unambiguous way, that affordances are best conceptualized within this dispositional ontology. And then he works through some of the consequences of that. And sometimes the word relational comes up,
Yeah.
but not meaning that affordances are relations, right? And so but he says some very explicit things where he just says that the affordances it's a property of the environmental part of the equation.
And whether an organism can pick that up depends on that organism's effectivities.
Yes.
Is that, I read that as, and I might be completely off here, that for him, that was part of the ontology of it being, you know, they're a thing, they're not something that's subjective, that then, you know, the affordances within an environment then are part of this, you know, reality.
Absolutely. They're real.
And that was the important bit, that they're part of the ontology section of this. They're real, they're there. Whether organisms can use them or do use them depends on multiple things.
Yes.
And those effectivities are depending on, obviously, their perceptual apparatus, but also whether or not they need something. So the hermit crab example that he gave, does it need to hide from a squid? Does it need a shelter, or is it hungry? That's also part of affordances. And you can see that if it was only relational, you would end up back in this, there's no real reality, it's all subjective mess again. That was my reading.
Yeah.
That's always been my take on it as well. And that's grounded pretty firmly.
Can we go through a specific example to maybe help people? So pick a particular affordance. You can eat me, like
the step down,
or you know, that you
step
can,
across.
Yeah.
Well, right.
What?
So okay, page 336, right?
Yeah.
He's talking
That
about
is an important point here.
Yeah. So basically, he describes a surface that has a step of some height, right?
A gap in it, yeah.
So
how you get down the step.
Yeah. So the surface, as it comes up to that edge, you would describe it as a brink, right? You're on the brink of a step. So the affordance of a brink in a surface, there's a case in point. The affordance differs for animals of different sizes, right? And so a large animal can step down a certain step. A middle-sized animal might be able to jump down it, and a small animal would have to crawl down it. So the affordances on offer to that organism relate to the organism's properties. Right?
Effectivities,
Yeah, but this is it, right? In the sense that but then he says, so there's these three affordance properties that are available to different organisms, right? This threesome of affordances is a property of the brink, full stop, end of story.
Yes.
So the brink has all of these things and more on offer, right? And then he talks about with a gap, right, whether or not it's crossable or not. You know, if you're walking slowly, you might have to step across it. If you're running, you can jump across it. And if you're walking slowly, the gap might be too big for you to get across. So it does not afford crossing. It affords not crossing. And
or
he
if
says,
you're tired, or you're carrying a rucksack, or
whatever, right?
Yeah,
so
there's lots of things. Yeah,
you have a
slippy ground.
And this gap can afford non-crossing or crossing to the same organism, just depending on the circumstances. And he also says that pair of affordances is a property of the gap, right?
Okay.
So the way I've been trying to describe it is the word affordance is part of the scientific analysis of the perception action loop. And by analysis, I mean the breaking down of it into the various bits, right? Affordance is the label we give to the organism environment perception action loop that resides in the environment, right? Effectivity is the name that we give to the set of properties that reside, are embodied or implemented by the dynamics of the organism. When those two are brought into a relation, i.e. through perception and action, they are placed in a relation, then a behavior emerges from that. And the behavior that emerges depends on the affordance, the effectivity, and the relation into which they are placed, right? So part of the issue is that affordances is the way of describing the world. That's what's out there to be perceived.
Yeah.
It's not the whole behavior. And this, I think, is the mistake that people make, is that they want behavior and affordances to be the same thing. And I don't think that they are. And Turvey does not think that they are, right?
And he then...
Yeah, so the importance of stepping over a gap exists irrespective of whether you perceive it or not, depends on your and
Absolutely.
how, and that results in behavior.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I'll give you an extreme example. In this state I live in, the affordance of stepping over the Grand Canyon exists for a infinitely large organism,
Dinosaur.
a huge organism. No organism on Earth perceives that, right? Because
Right.
they don't have the activities, but that affordance exists.
And because it exists, in principle, evolution could produce an organism that was able to perceive.
Yeah. And this is where we get into the entropy, isn't it? And
Yes, we're
also,
in the free energy.
which I think
Yeah.
is fascinating. And again, I'm sure you two will both be explore this a bit more. He also talked about the fact that an organism could potentially perceive various affordances that were open to that organism.
Yeah.
But once they chose one, then it collapses. And I can't remember what the word was on that. So you've got this open, that it's like coherent until
decoherence.
The choice is made, and then you get decoherence. And it made me think about what was the work on I can't remember what it's called now. You know, holding those possibilities open as long as possible in skilled performance before you choose. By choosing.
Yeah.
I think
because that's fascinating. That's it. Skilled intentionality framework. Thank you.
So
I think that's purposeful, right? Does this make the potential affordances for something in an environment essentially boundless? They could be anything.
No,
like if they're not, or is it just based? Is
not
it when we define
organism.
if it's not in terms of the person? Is it physics? How do we define the set of affordances for an object in the environment?
It's not boundless because there's a finite number of things you can do with the thing that's only got a finite number of
it's
properties.
Very large. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a large set, but you know, the sofa that I'm sitting on affords sitting on, it affords standing on, it affords lying on,
bouncing.
Yeah. I was big enough and strong enough I could pick it up and throw it, right? But it doesn't afford eating. And why? Because it's not made of anything that I can eat.
Right.
Right. And so there are constraints based on what the thing is made of, right, by the environmental dynamics, right? And I think that's really important. So I do think that the set of affordances that my sofa has on offer is very large. And that's the other thing. When we study them, we talk about one affordance at a time, perceiving the affordance for affordance of that thing. There's the truth is that there are many nested affordances going on all at the same time. And there's information for all of that because information is nested and going on at lots of different scales, etc. And my intentions matter into which ones I pick out, etc. This is the real frustration of trying to describe this loopy process with serial language, right? Turvey's made a claim that affordances reside in the environmental part of this thing.
So they're part of the habitat.
Yes, but
not the niche. They're the habitat.
There's a next part of that sentence that you have to hold in your head simultaneously to be true at the same time, which is that the effectivities reside in the organism and the information connects them via action. And there's action as well. And so there's about 14 different things going on all at the same time that describe the entire thing. And so saying that, and I think part of the frustration that people have is that when you say something like affordances reside in the environment, it makes them sound like they're this thing that is distinct from us, that can't possibly be dual with us, right?
Yeah.
They can be dual with us because they're part of an organism environment system. They're properties. I think they're properties of organism environment systems that live entirely in the environment part of the organism environment system. It's the way.
So in the habitat, because he talked about habitats and niches, didn't he? Or is that too simplistic? So the affordances,
the habitats
are the habitat, and the realization of affordances would be
niche construction.
I think.
Yeah.
And all niches are going to get exploited or all habitats will be exploited at some point, just because
turned into niches, right?
Into niches, yes.
Yeah. So he's making that thermodynamic argument that evolution is a process of coming up with as many different ways of dissipating energy into entropy as can possibly be done. And one of the ways to do that really quickly is by exploiting affordances.
Affordances within their habitat. Yeah.
And there's a set of affordances that I can exploit, but the reason there aren't just humans is that there's affordances I can't exploit.
Yeah.
So you build something that can exploit those, and then you build something else, and you build something else, and you get the diversity of life that you see. And between us, we're creating
exploit all affordances.
Yeah, right. We're producing entropy till the cows come home, right? So, yeah, which is a weird way of thinking about perception and action, really, when you think like it's an old frame.
Yeah.
It's way more fun bending your brain around that, though, than looking up lots of complicated words and trying to get your head around the idea that there's a man in a room.
Yeah, that's always made more sense to me too, especially the examples you were talking about, Mary, and where our affordances change for us, like from moment to moment, depending on our activity. In the relationship view, then they would cease to exist suddenly.
Yes.
Right? That's always kind of frustrating. They're not perceived anymore is what's more satisfying to me. Because my affectivities have changed.
Exactly.
They're still there.
One of my concerns about, say, Tony Chimera's notion of affordances is the kind of relation that they are makes it, the way he writes it in his book in 2009 made it seem like if I'm not currently capable of doing something, the affordance doesn't exist. And then my question is, how do I ever learn how to do something new if the affordance doesn't exist to provide me with the pull that I need in order to be able to organize my behavior, right? If I have to negotiate the entire damn thing into existence in order to do something new, how is that possible, right? You need something other than affordances to drive learning.
Yes.
And the question is, what the hell is that, right?
So back to a reality that is,
And so, I think Turvey is committed to the right things, and I think he's making those decisions because he is worried about all these issues, right? Like he needs affordances to be pretty weird, but he needs them to be able to do certain things, right? That's the whole point of an ontology, right?
Yeah.
You have an ontology where, like, you have a set of things that you think that are real and that are possible. Why? So that they can do stuff.
Yeah. I think he wants to, he's trying to, given all the history he's shown us, he's trying to replace, like he talks about affordances, the new primary qualities of an object, as opposed to its color, its size, right? He's trying to replace something. So I think you're right. That's why he leans so heavily into this.
That was interesting when he talks about primary things like the size of something or shape. Again, is something that's measured by something else, but something that everyone supposedly agrees with. So you've got another, but affordances aren't measured. They're measured by the organism, as it were, or in relation to the organism, rather than something external that humans have created. I think that's where he got into the bit, why do we think that a ruler or something we invented a few hundred years ago is correct compared to...
That's it, right? There are affordances and they are measured by organisms via perception.
Yeah.
And we need all of those pieces in this ontology to get perception and action to work. One of the pitches of the relational thing is that you try to build the measurement of the affordance into the affordance itself, right? It's the affordance is defined relative to the organism already without the organism doing anything. But actually the organism has to do something. The organism has to come along and perceive it in its own using its own rulers, its body and its effectivities. And that's really important because the thing is, if you don't measure the environment accurately with respect to your actual own effectivities, then you die, right? You get run over by a bus, you slip on the ice, you miss that step and you fall and it goes tits up, right? So you have to be perceiving things in your own terms, not on average, not in general, right? So it's good, actually, that affordances don't come immediately already organism relative. Because if they did, then what if I'm not that organism, for example, right? Like I need to be doing some work. The organism needs to be doing some work in this. And the work that I do is that I perceive the affordance and I scale that perception. I calibrate that perception using my perception of my effectivities to complement of the affordance, right?
And if we go back to Adolf and Eleanor Gibson's work, then all these young animals, organisms learn that perception action coupling and how to scale their affordances when they start to move intentionally within an environment.
Yes. And Karen's got this great description where she notes that infants have to do it multiple times. There's multiple learning curves in locomotion.
Continuously,
The effectivities keep changing, right? You get cruising, crawling, and walking. And so you get these kids who are skilled crawlers down a slope, and they transition into walkers, and they are immediately
all over, fall down
walkers, right? And they have to learn the relationship again.
Yeah.
Right. So the affordance hasn't changed, the slope hasn't changed, right? What's on offer hasn't changed, but they need to measure it differently because they've literally become
discussion. I haven't come across this. Is there any discussion of perceiving sort of a nested affordance? Like if I could stand up, I could do this. Like if I could change my own effectivities. I think that's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, a little bit.
Driving us, pushing us to.
I think we do when we're older, because the running one is as well, isn't it? And it's a big thing in the stuff that I was looking at with the horses and show jumping. You know, if a horse is walking, how high it can jump is very different from if it's flat out and it's got loads of power and speed behind it, then it can clear a bigger. So we will speed up or do something differently. And then it got into the whole
we could perceive nested affordances, right? If I stand on that couch, I can reach that light bulb. Can we do it in terms of our own effectivities? If I could increase my effectivities, well, I guess that is standing on the couch,
jumping,
increasing my effectivities, right? Just in a temporary way. Yeah.
So Jeff's done a tiny little. Bingham has done a little bit of related work where he was doing reach to grasp stuff for a while, and then but that was reach to grasp where you're seated and the thing was already in reach. And then he and Joe Anderson, one of his PhD students, Joe's thesis was all about where you had to walk to reach to grasp. So there was multiple things going on. They were primarily looking at the information rather than the affordance story, but that's one aspect of it. But I've been thinking about this in the context of my throwing stuff. So I've got this way of formalizing affordances that I have a paper that's under review right now that's just arguing that this is the right way to formalize this account of affordances. And one of the things, so you get these manifolds effectively, in the possible space of release of throws that you can make. There's a subspace of that produce a hit, right? And that manifold disappears with distance, right? You get to a certain point where you can no longer hit the target. And one of the things I've actually always wanted the study I've always wanted to run is to get people to where the task is go towards the target until you think you can hit it, right? When does the target make itself hittable? When does the manifold become good enough that you could do it, right? And I think you could start because I play softball and I know I can do this. If I'm out in the outfield and if I've just fielded a deep ball, I know that I have to run into a certain point before the infielder becomes within my range, for example. So you can do things like that. So I can literally see what I need to do in order to create the affordance of being able to hit that infield.
Yeah. If I'm climbing and I start getting pumped, I know that I need to stop and shake out before I'm going to be able to actually use that hold. So, and that's a really immediate one again, as well as we have some comments.
You think about it, we purposely alter our effectivities all the time, moving closer, climbing up, right? That's what we're doing. We're doing that all the time.
Jesus, we fatigue.
Yeah.
You know,
Climbing's a fun one. I remember climbing sometimes where you'd try and do a move and it just wouldn't work. And then you just move your shift.
Yeah.
You'd move your body to a slightly different configuration and suddenly the whole thing would make sense, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I had that experience over and over again.
So the biggest thing with just rechanging your positioning, so for balance and movement. There are some comments. I don't know whether you I'm looking at
I was just going to put this one up here.
Being asked some complicated questions, which is great.
So affordances are a set of solutions that is available in the environment to an organism. Are tractors the affordances that are...
So the approach I take that implements what I think is a Turvey account definitely kind of considers affordances as like a solution set. absolutely. Within a dynamic
landscape.
framework, but absolutely, yeah.
I think so.
And it is a set. It has to be a set, right? Like the affordance to throw something, the affordance to hit a target with a throw is always multiply realizable, right? There's multiple release parameter combinations for a given distance that will produce a hit. And that's really important because I'm a massively redundant system, and you can't lock a massively redundant system down with a single solution. It's too unstable, right? You need room to maneuver, have that good and bad variability happen, right? So it is a solution set. There's always multiple ways of affecting an affordance.
Yeah. And so are attractors, the affordance that are perceived.
Yeah, maybe that's a whole other layer of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the set of, for most everyday objects, the set is going to be very, very large, right? My desk, you're right. I could sit on it, lie on it. I could also negative affordance. I could trip over it. I could bang into it, step my toe. But there's a million things I could do with my desk.
Your table is only one of the affordances within that particular environment at that moment, isn't it? There's a whole field of affordances that your table is just part of.
Yeah. And in some ways, it's kind of funny that we ever bother to call all of those things by one word, table, right? Like that's almost that's a side effect of our language that we've got distracted by for a long time, right? That's
well, we usually define things. The people that make things define by the most, the affordance they want you to use. Right? That's how we label objects, right? Or define.
And but that's design as well, right? This is why affordance features so prominently in design. Is that there's lots of different ways of making something, and as soon as you're designing something, there's the possibility of good and bad and everything in between design, and it's all connected to affordances. That was Donald Norman's whole argument, right?
Yep.
Is it worth moving on to the next chapter?
Sure.
That's the thing. Now we've got into the bit where we all love
the dispositional relational.
And the idea of
Andrew has a paper on it if you want to read more. But I think that was a pretty straightforward explanation, I think. Well, it's as straightforward as you can get. You're loopy, as you put it.
Okay. Look, it is, but it's I think he's fairly unambiguous in a few places for a change. So he's surprisingly definitive about a couple of things in that chapter that I thought was quite interesting and really useful.
So chapter 23, ecological optics, is one of my favorite topics.
The other element of the ontology, information.
Yeah, we're getting right. It's a natural follow-on because affordances are conveyed by information. Where does information come from? And Turvey does a long time. For the first part of the chapter is kind of challenging the assumption that the starting point of perceiving is the retinal image, right?
Yeah.
The traditional assumption.
There was some interesting stuff there as well. I just thought about the idea that you could freeze the last thing seen, and that would be great in, whodunits.
Well, they always have it in a lot of movies, right? A lot of famous movies where they try to capture the last image of a dead person.
I know, right? Didn't the Victorians literally think that was possible, right?
For sure, yeah.
That's where the image resides, and then he
has literally,
That he had that picture then.
Like he gives a specific example of, the idea is that you literally on the back of your eye, there is, if I'm looking at a candle, if I could look in there, I could see a candle. It would be upside down. And I teach this when I taught, the idea that our starting point of vision is upside down, blurry, two-dimensional thing that we have to reconstruct a 3D world from, right? And that's where the whole problem. That's where the perception problem starts, because we're assuming we're starting with bad data,
and
right?
All non-ecological theories of all modern non-ecological theories of visual perception are increasingly sophisticated image analysis techniques. Why? Because the image is the raw material for vision. So all of it about extracting cues and figuring things out, every single square inch of it is effectively a computer vision class, right?
Yeah.
Coming up with increasingly sophisticated algorithms for extracting and figuring out properties from an image. And the thing is, you can go a long way with that, turns out. Computational vision, you can get
better and better at that.
And do all kinds of interesting things. All of them are fundamentally doing that. And there's no such thing as the retinal image, says Turvey. The retinal image is just a careless use of words.
Oh, he talked about it almost like a lazy pedagogy, didn't he? That you could have a model or a visual model or a
he
mental
uses
model.
some kind of
He was like, ooh.
derogatory terms for people that he says adult. There's kind of a few,
he's like, yeah, you might think this if you're an idiot.
he's pretty aggressive about it. But the idea is that there's intermediate object, this projection of the world. Instead of acting on the world, we act on this projection of the world.
Yeah.
And then he talked about the going to study where like almost illusions as then a point of start. And I remembered, because the one he used was that something looks bent when it's in water, and I remembered my undergrad psych and doing this, going through this and thinking, but when I put my paddle in the water, that bend tells me where the air ends and the water begins. It's actually really important information. Like, because it's really important that I know where that boundary is if I'm operating at that boundary, because I can't breathe underwater. And I want my blade in.
So that example is, right, if you put a straight stick into water, it appears to be bent, right? And it's a
perception error.
Why? Because the stick is actually bent, but it looks crooked. But as Turvey just points out here, right, it couldn't possibly look any other way.
Because it tells me where the water boundary is.
Right? It tells you where that boundary is. Why? It tells you there's a boundary between two different media, and light travels slower through water than it travels through air, right? And that's why you get that refractive difference. And it couldn't possibly be any other way. And this gets to the idea of visual perception. There's a Gibson quote here about visual perception is specific to the information.
Yeah.
It, like, if you perceived that stick as straight, then we would know that there was sophisticated internal inferential material mechanisms working in here in order to correct all these things. But we don't see it as straight. We see it as crooked. Why? Because that's what's in the light. And you couldn't see it any other way, because that's what the light is telling you, right?
Yeah.
And to see it any other way is dumb. And to think of it as a mistake is an error. And again, it gets back to this idea of, sure, the stick is actually straight, but if you look at the information is bent.
It's telling you it's going from one medium to another. Yeah.
And so that's telling you what the eye's measuring the information. It's not measuring the physical reality as measured in the ruler, right?
When the water's dirty, you can't see the blade, but it doesn't mean that it's vanished.
But it's getting the job of perception wrong, right? It's saying the job of perception is to reconstruct the absolute physical qualities of this object. It's a straight object, it's made of wood, it's brown, whatever. It's this long, no matter what the context is, right? Where a job of perception is always to reconstruct. If its object is straight, it's always straight. Object is, that's not the job. Instead of perceiving the environment, it's to perceive the object.
Yeah, right.
Separate. It's the dualism, right? It's dualism again.
But this is why information is a really critical part of the ecological story, right? Is that there is the world. So, and this was the first thing that Jeff taught me when I was his PhD student, and it's the thing he drilled into me for the entire time. There is the world, there is information about the world, and those two things are lawfully linked.
Yeah.
But they are not identical to one another.
Yeah.
And we interact with information, right? So information doesn't mediate our access to the world, but it is the thing we're in contact with. That's the thing that the nervous system resonates to. That's the thing the eye is detecting, right? So the informational story, and the thing is, information can't be identical to the world. For lots of reasons. It's kinematic, not dynamic, and the world is dynamic, right? There's no mass dimension in information. So they can't be identical. They can be specific, but they can't be identical. And there's many examples that you can show. And the illusion with the stick is one example, but there's lots of others where the experience of the observer tracks the information and not the state of affairs behind the scenes, right? And the information, but that's okay, because the information is based in is lawfully created, right? If the information was somehow inferential, or if it was just a cue, then it makes sense to talk about errors and problems, right? But because information is lawfully created and therefore specific to the thing it's about, that means it's information about a boundary between two media, for example. And the fact that you're so caught up on the stick being bent just means that you, the scientist, are asking the wrong question, right?
Yes. You're assuming the wrong job for perception.
Yeah. What was I can't find the quote. He was talking about that we don't perceive the light rays, we're perceiving.
Yeah, we cover that in a previous chapter, right? You don't
you
don't see light.
Don't see the light because
which is lucky. Otherwise, you wouldn't see anything.
Yeah, we wouldn't. We see objects, right?
Yeah.
The reflection of light off of things in our environment.
There's such a lovely thing. It's like, where is it? Then in the course of conversing in a furnished room, we would not, if we saw the light, we wouldn't see the person with whom we were conversing because the light would be in the way. Like,
it sounds so absurd, but
I know, but it's like you have to say it because you've got this notion we're only in contact with photons of light. It's like, no, we're not, right? That's not what's going on, which is weird, right? From that Cartesian sort of mechanistic in the old-fashioned sense notion, the only thing that's hitting the retina is photons of light, right? And so that's the thing we're in contact with. That's got to be our raw material somehow. The notion that that's not the raw material of perception is a necessary precursor to making direct perception an option, but it's a big radical step, right? We've talked about the fact that, as far as I know, Gibson's the first person to even propose an idea in which it was plausible, the direct perception. I don't know that anyone else has ever done it, right?
Does he get into Lee's swinging room after that, which I love?
Yeah, well, so he goes through a few examples. So
that's Muller liar, yeah.
So
he does the 4 types, the climbing, the 4 types of perceiving.
Yeah,
you appreciate that, Marianne.
I did. Yeah, it was. I really enjoyed these 2 chapters.
And his famous diagram of ecological optics.
Yeah,
where the light.
So the structure of the chapter is that he's going to critique a bunch of common objections to the ecological approach in the form of illusions and things, and he's going to use them as a way of laying out how you would tell an ecological optics story or an ecological information story about what was actually happening in that situation. So it's quite a nice structure. He's getting 2 jobs out of what he's talking about. One is that he's refuting that the illusion is a problem, and 2, he's reformulating the illusion as explicable by if you pay attention to ecological optics, and here's the specific element of ecological optics that allows you to that allows you to explain that. So it's quite an interesting structure. So so the first thing he talks about is prisms and prism adaptation, and the idea is that doesn't invert the retinal image. What it actually does is it screws with everything. All the different ways, and you're perceiving yourself in relation to the environment, you're perceiving the environment in relation to you. Like, all of those things get disrupted by a prism. And if it was just flipping an image, it couldn't possibly be doing all of those things, right?
No.
So that's a hint. The data is telling us that notion of it just being an image flip is not an adequate explanation.
That image flip wouldn't help us navigate complex environments at speed, would it?
Yeah, exactly.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Those 4 things that he talks about.
Yeah, and recovery from prism adaptation. If you wear prisms for weeks and then take them off,
you get
it's a disaster for quite a long time, right? But it's a disaster across multiple things. It's not just that you're doing things that when you're reaching up instead of reaching down. It's that you struggle to perceive things in action scale units, right? Your calibrations are. Why would all of that get thrown off just by flipping the image if that's what's going on? No, clearly something weirder is happening, right?
Yeah. And this, for people that don't know, prisms bend light, right? So you can get a pair of prisms that you wear, and the most immediate thing we observe is it make the world look upside down. Okay? So, and if you wear them for a while, you recalibrate and you learn to do you can drive with them on, you can do anything. The problem is when you take them, the issue is when you take them off, the original assumption is you just get the opposite inverted effect, right? Everything looks right side up now, but it looks upside down to you, and but like as Andrew's saying, there's way more to it than that. It's quite involved, actually. And you fairly quickly, not as long as it takes you the first time, you fairly quickly recalibrate. And I used to do this with darts in the lab. It was always fun. Have people throw darts with a prism and they miss to the right, and you take the prisms off and they miss to the left with wearing nothing, which is quite impressive. You can make people miss they're not wearing any fancy glasses. But it's the same principle. Yeah.
So that's that one. Then there's the issue.
Liar.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So the Mueller liar is an interesting one.
Most famously, yeah.
Right. So the Mueller liar illusion is that if you have two line segments that if you measure them with a ruler, they're the same length, and one has arrows facing that way and one has arrows facing that way, and that makes one of them look longer than the other one, even though according to the ruler they're the same, right? And so the idea is that, and like Marianne was saying earlier, the assumption is that the ruler is telling you the truth, and that any discrepancy is therefore a mistake made by the human. Right? Whereas what's actually going on is that the ruler tells you one thing because it's a certain kind of measurement device, and the eyes tell you a different thing because they're a different kind of measurement device. Yes. They do different things. Right?
I try to think about that and what would those things look like in an environment, and they would, for example, the different ways in which those arrows would tell you, for example, whether something is an in-cut or whether it's the outside of a cliff face. So I'm trying to think, what is it? What type of information might be meaningful?
There is some sense of that where one of them looks like a corner, looks like in a carpentered environment, one of them looks like it's closer to you than the other. And so one of the potential explanations is that you're factoring in distance. That's one way to go about it. Turvey goes about it in a pretty different way, right? Yeah. He's not making a case about your experience or any of the statistical accumulation of experience or anything. He's saying, no, the data is telling you that the eyes are a different kind of measurement system. And we have the mathematical sort of capability of identifying different kinds of measurement systems. And so what you do is you should go and find the kind of measurement system that gives you the answers that people do. And it turns out that there is a measurement system of that kind, and it falls foul to the Mueller liar illusion in the same way that people do, which suggests that that's a better description of the way eyes measure the world than this other version, right?
Yeah.
And again, it's all just about instead of looking at the mistake, as you say, is to take the ruler as truth.
Yes, instead of
the eyes. What you've actually got is two pieces of data. That's what the thing looks like to a ruler. That's what the thing looks like to a human. And what that is now a hint is to what kind of measurement device those things are. And that's a wildly different question, right? Because the assumption is that perception is about, like Rob was saying, the assumption is that perception is about getting to reality. Not. It's about resonating to information so that you can act in the environment, which is just an entirely qualitatively radically different conceptualization of what the hell's going on, right?
But it's still a real environment, which is why I started with the ontology, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the other notion, of course, is that if you ask people to make judgments of things like weight, you're probably actually getting side effects of affordance judgments, right?
Yeah, so fatigue, all sorts of stuff, strength, fatigue.
There's a size weight illusion, right?
Yeah, which Jeff has argued is just you're asking the wrong question. You should have been. They're trying to give you an answer about weight, and what they're actually giving you an answer about is throwability.
Yeah.
Now, whether or not that holds up, there's arguments about exactly whether or not that particular analysis holds water. But the basic idea is the psychologist asked the wrong question. It's only a size weight illusion because the psychologist is asking you about
why would a human want to,
right?
Yeah.
In our evolution, we wouldn't have wanted to know that something is an exact weight, would we? But it's quite important to know whether we can pick it up or throw it or use it.
Movable is it by name, right?
What can we do with it? Yeah.
What can we do with it? Exactly.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. And then
what else?
The Ames room.
Oh, the Ames room first.
I loved his room. Yeah.
So Ames room, if you don't know, actually use this, is It's a room. If you've probably everyone's seen this science museum. Andrew's holding up the picture. It's a room where you look back, and the back wall is slanted away from you in reality. And there's two people standing on the wall. And the idea is that you perceive the wall as walls are straight, right? They're made so it's parallel, it's perpendicular.
The wall is painted.
And they're painted, the windows are to make it look like it is.
Yeah.
And so the two people standing there, if they're two younger, one looks ridiculously large, like it's an oversized person.
And it's a wild effect.
It's very compelling. And
There's
the traditional assumption is the kind of inferential, the same as the Muller-Lye reason, right? Because you misperceive distance, you alter the size, and this kind of thing. But yeah, well, what's Turvey's? Yeah.
So he points to. So I've actually blogged about this paper before. So Sverker Rundsen, who is an ecological psychophysicist, wrote
Smart
this paper.
Perceptual Mechanisms guy.
Perceptual advisor. Yeah. He wrote this paper in '88, which Turvey cites, about equivalent configurations, and the idea is that the Ames room is a cheat, and it's anyway, there's a lot going on there, but basically it's a response to a paper. I love this paper. I love this Rundsen paper so much. It's a work of ecological genius. It's just beautiful. So there was an experimental paper came out where some people were testing Gibson's theory about directness of perception on the assumption that direct meant accurate to physics.
Veridical.
Right?
Yeah.
Which is that was their first mistake. But what they did was they did an Ames room setup. It was a little miniature Ames room, and they put little discs at the end of the room in the different locations, and you had to make judgments of the relative sizes of these things. Which one was bigger? Which one was smaller? Were they the same size? So first of all, it's a judgment task, not an action task. That's introducing. And then what they did, this was quite clever. So then what they did was they got people to view the Ames room under different conditions. So the first thing they did was monocular in a bite board. So all you get is the optic flow generated by the eye. And then you get binocular, but still in the bite board. And then you get monocular, no bite board, binocular, no bite board. And then they got people, they allowed them to move in and kind of do a big perspective shift and sort of do some real exploration of it. And basically what happens is that the magnitude of the illusion effect goes down.
Down. Yeah.
Surprise, right? They get it down to the point where in the condition where you have complete free viewing, binocular, and you're allowed to do big perspective shifts, they get the error down to 2 millimeters, an error of 2 millimeters. But that, in their analysis, turns out to be statistically significantly different from an error of zero.
Yeah.
Right? And on the basis of that, they say, well, we've given you the full Gibsonian viewing conditions and you're still making a significant error. And so Rundsen writes this beautiful paper where, first of all, he goes, dude, 2 millimeters. What are you talking about? And then second of all, does this beautiful dissection along the lines of what Turvey talks about in here, where he just ecologically reframes the entire thing about what's going on in the Ames room. Talking about these equivalent configurations, the fact that, basically the Ames room only works because it's meticulously configured to look a certain way at a certain location. Effectively, the Ames room illusion works because it structures the optic array in a very particular way, and therefore you have no choice.
It's consistent with the information, right?
Absolutely. Right. Yeah. So the Rundsen paper is one of my favorite things I've ever, that paper made me smarter when I read it.
Can you share that? It sounds
it's Rundsen 1988. It's on it's on the blog. If you search for Rundsen, you'll come across it.
Rundsen has a lot of good stuff. Yeah.
Oh, he's so smart. He's so smart.
He is.
He's so smart, right?
Yeah.
But this paper is just beautiful.
But that's kind of one of the general most illusions are privileged viewpoints where there's, and this is with Gibson, by going back to last chapter, everything is changing and dynamic in our environment. We're creating this artificial situation where there's no change, right? We're removing most of Gibson's in perceptual invariance. Most of his information comes from. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, because the idea, of course, that's the simpler case. It's no, to the perceiving acting organism, the dynamic moving case is the simpler case, and the restricted case is the weird one.
Yeah,
for
sure.
Anyway, sorry.
So its perception is consistent with the information. So it's actually supporting direct perception, not going.
That's it.
Your stick in the water, Marianne. It's supporting. It's telling you that the medium has changed. The thing is in two different. That's good, right?
And it's not a mistake.
No,
to say it's a mistake to have that perceptual experience is to misunderstand that perception couldn't possibly be any other way given information.
And if it was, we'd never be able to perceive before we had then you need your loan on intelligence in order to be able to perceive in the first place.
Absolutely.
Think about a bird. A bird would break its neck because it wouldn't realize it was going into the water to get the thing, right?
Yeah. No
example, but right.
No gannets, right? David Lee.
Gannets would break its wings because it wouldn't realize water. It's done to a different surface.
100%.
But so the last one, Lee. You like this? So this is Dave Lee from Edinburgh, another incredible scientist. So much for the ecological.
This was one of the early, very early things that I came across within ecological psychology, and it blew my mind. It was very powerful. I'm going to let you guys
I tried
talk
this.
About it. It's your thing.
Ian Howard had various versions of this in his lab. So basically, it's a room. Imagine a room. We take a chainsaw and we cut the bottom around, so it's now detached from the floor. We attach it from a chain from a crane. We swing the room back and forth. Right, you're standing in the middle, and we swing the room back and forth. What do you perceive? Most people, I think you could actually make little kids will fall over.
Where
adults will sway. Adults will start swaying. So I'll sway backwards as the room starts to come closer to me. Yeah.
So the squidgy, ground, you're more likely to fall as well. So anything. Yeah. But I think what was important about that was that people didn't know that was happening because all the walls are painted white.
Yes.
There's no, there's no explicit information that it's moving. It's
yes.
Yeah. And so, actually you can, there is
different versions.
There is some texture on the wall that you get flow from the fact, but the point is that flow is you can make it so that flow is within the bounds that you normally get just by standing, because you're always moving when you're standing, right? But so Turvey describes it here as the reason why you fall, or the reason why you are destabilized by the motion of this, is not that you are comparing vision to the vestibular system and drawing a conclusion that something is wrong. What's happening, like they describe it as an optic push, not an inference, right? The optic array is providing you with information to control the forces at work, right? Which is Tom Stoffregan had one of these rooms he was in Cincinnati. I visited his lab once and went into the room, and he got me to stand on the beam, and he did it really subtly at first. And then he was like, "Are you ready?" And he pushed the room really abruptly. I felt like my eyeballs were getting sucked out of my head by the changing optic flow. Like it was, so optic push is 100% the right description.
Yeah.
But you can simply entrain the optic flow.
Babies, looming effect in babies is one of those things that is already there, really.
Yeah.
Most people, the related percept, most people might have had is vection, right? When you're standing, when you're waiting to go at an intersection and a big truck or something starts to go, so you might slam on your brakes because you feel like you're rolling backwards, right? We treat it as a misperception. We're assigning the motion to us when it's actually something else.
But no,
it's the same with the room.
It's global optic flow, and global optic flow specifies self-motion, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And so that's.
I was going to say, if people knew the room was moving, they wouldn't rock. It's because they don't know the room's moving that they try and stabilize their posture. Is that right?
I don't know, actually. If you tell people what's going on, how much are they able to stabilize or resist the coupling? I don't know.
I don't think you can.
I
the
don't think
knowledge of it doesn't really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Ian Howard he studied stuff for space travel, and he had a version of this where you could flip the room upside down, and you'd be hanging. I could feel the weight of the straps on me holding me up, but I still perceived
it
everything
upside
as
down.
as being right side up. You perceive everything as being right side up in the room after a few seconds. It's really weird.
It's because the optic flow doesn't look like the room's moving, isn't it?
No,
that's why the optic flow doesn't look like the room's moving. And if
you're
it
wearing
did,
a tie, it's doing this, but you have a lot of counterfactual things. But
Bill,
again, the point is it's consistent with the information. Yes, right.
Yeah, that's it. The perceptual experience is specific to the information.
Because if there's something that was obvious, sorry.
Yeah, and global optic flow, when everything you see moves together, that is specific to the event that you
are moving.
Self-motion.
That's
local optic flow. So local optic flow, something in the environment.
When one thing moves, it
local
means
flow, it's you.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say. That's that the optic flow is telling, or the optic flow is that we're moving, not the room.
And again, this is the advantage of information, is that if you don't, it's not that global optic flow is a cue or a hint.
No.
It's that because of the laws governing the way the world is projected into ecological optics, the optic array, when you move, could not be any other way. That's what it means for an information variable to be specific and lawfully related to a state of affairs. It could not be any other way. And so, as Turvey is kind of highlighting, if your perceptual experience doesn't track the information, which couldn't possibly be any other way, then something would be seriously wrong with it. Like you'd never get off the ground, literally.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that's a good example of the Gibson's specification, right? It's not based on statistical, it's based on experience, right? You learn that as a kid, right? When you start to fall, everything you're looking at goes whoosh, right? Versus when someone hands you a toy, just that thing goes whoosh, right? It's a very simple relationship we learn very early on.
So we're born sensitive to optic flow, but you have to learn what all the flow variables are. Absolutely.
Yeah, so that babies are born.
Needed some work where they loom things at babies.
Absolutely. And you work your way up to all the learning there.
And you duck early first and then calibrate from there.
But that's the interesting thing, right? If you look at what babies are doing, they're ducking early relative to the motion of the object, but they're ducking at a sensible time given the information variable they're using.
Exactly.
It's just latched onto not the best information variable. They've latched into a simple information variable that isn't quite, that is roughly informative about what they want to do, namely duck, but it's not specific to the timing of the ducking. They've got to velocity, but they haven't got to
precise timing of ducking. You're not looking
for
that.
Behavior, their behavior, their mistake in ducking is it's them. The mistake is simply that they're coupled to the wrong information variable, or they're coupled with a different information variable than the experimenter thinks is the correct one, right?
But it's an important one from the evolutionary perspective, because it's much safer to duck early than late.
For sure.
Good chapters. I
enjoyed those. Well, and the last one, just really quickly on the Necker cube, is really nice as well. So the Necker cube is the visual illusion. It's this wacky cube, right?
That's great. The cube, if you stare at it long enough, it flips.
Yeah, and if you stare at it long enough, the orientation of it flips. And the idea is that that's a mental phenomenon, that the flip is happening mentally.
Stable perception,
right? But if you examine the geometry of what the geometry of the object can tell you, given that it's a cube that's on a piece of paper, not an actual cube, right? The flip is, the ambiguity is in the information. So there's an ambiguous perceptual experience. Why? Because there's an ambiguity present in the information because of the nature of the projection of the 3D object onto a 2D piece of paper. Perception is, again, specific to the information, right? And that's a really cool example, because it seems one of the arguments, if perception's direct, right? you've got, this direct access. You've just got this free ride out into the way things really are. Why would you have this flip? Well, that's not what direct perception means.
Yes.
And so when the information is ambiguous, your experience will be ambiguous. So if there is ambiguity in the information, and why is there ambiguity in the information? Because it's a picture of a 3D object, and 2D pictures of 3D objects can be ambiguous. Right?
No, yeah.
So,
That's back to the retinal image, right? Right. But yeah, that's a really important point, Andrew.
I love this one. That was really cool.
Andrew, what direct perception does not mean that you have absolute accurate perception of the world at all times. That's not what direct perception means. It means you directly perceive information that is specific to, and then we're perceive. You get meaning from what the object affords you.
Yes, and for Turvey, the thing that underwrites the directness of perception is the laws.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Not Euclidean geometry.
Not Euclidean geometry, but the laws that govern the projection of the world into arrays. That is a lawful process, and it's that law that underwrites directness. And that's another, look, I'll flag up, that's another fight that some ecological psychologists are having, because they want to talk about non-specifying variables, or they want to talk about different kinds of information, and they're trying to expand out. And I've had this argument with people. For Turvey, if it's not a specifying variable, if it's not a lawful variable, all you've got is a Q. There's no directness to that, right? And if you want to have a theory of direct perception, but you don't want to talk about specifying variables, then you have a lot of work to do. This is one of the things.
And we're getting a little problem with learning, like direct learn, like when the possibility that people do perceive non-specifying variables initially and things like that.
And the thing is,
there's arguments within ecological psychology on this.
Yeah. My understanding is that would be like the example that I used in that story about the snow, that the pictures of dogs and wolves had snow in them. There was that was, I mean, it's a picture anyway, but it wasn't that wasn't like valid specifying information. It's just that it wasn't the information that actually was pertinent to what they wanted to perceive, which is very different from a cue. It's just like you're using information that happened to be an environment. It's more of an argument for representative learning design for some stuff. You don't use the wrong information rather, or less valid information. It's not that any of them are cues, it's just using the wrong.
In most cases when people are using non-specifying information, it's because you've created an environment for them to act in where it is specifying, where it works for what they want to do, because it's a narrow range of conditions. But
it doesn't have to be a cue. It could be other valid.
The thing is, like, even in the direct learning stuff, the kinds of information variables they're talking about are still lawfully created. They're still the problem is they call them non-specifying, because they're not specific to the property the experimenter is asking you to judge. The person that's still using them, because that's for some reason that might be access to, or their learning history is that's the one that they've landed on. The variable that they're using is still specific to something.
Yes.
And the thing it's specific to might be related to the thing that the scientist is asking questions about, but it's not. So it's non-specifying to the thing that the psychologist wants you to judge about, but it's specific to something else that might be related to that thing. So the non-specification issue is a mistake by the scientist.
It can be specific to an affordance depending on, like that the example I was going to learn across the street. If I learned across the street where all cars travel 50 miles an hour, then the distance to the car specifies the affordance of possibility. As soon as the speed varies, that it's
doesn't work anymore.
Absolutely.
So it depends.
But you can nudge people around. You can put people into constrained situations where the only information available to learn is one of these simpler variables that works in that one situation, and people will latch onto it
for sure.
Because of course they do, right? As soon as you break the scope of that variable, but that's cheating, right? That's the whole point. Is that's a cheat. That's a scientific. That's a cheat by the scientist.
But it's important in sport with non-representative.
We're not going to learn something that works in all possible conditions when we're operating in a narrow range of conditions. Humans don't work that way. We're not optimizers, right? Right.
Absolutely. That's again one of the keys
We're
why
efficient. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah. But,
and look, and representative design as well shows up in the you want your in the sports situation. The whole point of training is that you want that training to transfer to the game scenario. Transfer is a function of informational overlap, right?
Yes.
Skills
dynamic
transfer to the extent that you learn the right informational coupling. Right. So if you're in a restricted environment that doesn't make the informational coupling that would show up in the game, if your training scenario doesn't offer that as an option, then you'll never learn it and you won't get transferred to the game. If your training scenario offers that informational coupling, it's available to learn, and then you can shape people to learn it, and then you will get transfer. But you don't. So again, right? This is the thing. The relevant overlap is not at the level of affordances. The relevant overlap is at the level of information.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
What information specifies that affordance given the constraint?
And your example there, Rob's brilliant. If your training is all the cars are going at this speed, so this is the distance that you move, and your actual competition environment is everything's moving at different speeds.
Yeah.
Then
you're probably in that case you're going to get negative transfer, right?
Yes.
It's going to hurt you. You're going to have to unlearn what you learned before
because you're tuned in.
You're going to get hit by a car probably, right? Or you're going to step on the street.
Speaking of Sverker Rinson, he's done experiments where he's got people to judge the relative mass of things after collisions. It's a slightly weird little task. But one of the reasons he uses it is that there's multiple information variables that you can potentially latch onto, and you can nudge people around that learning space based on which ones you give them access to.
Yeah.
And then you put them in situations where they don't have access to the one that they learned, but there's another one available, and they're screwed until they learn the new one. Right? But so Rinson's done a bunch of psychophysics showing all these kind of, like, again, his stuff is cool. He's my very favorite visual.
How do you spell his name? R-U-S.
Rune, like R-U-N-E-S-O-N.
S-O-N, Rinson.
Yeah, David Jacobs has some good papers too showing, variability of practice is essentially what you're doing is you're making things that will be non-specifying in the game not useful in practice, right? That's the key to transfer, right?
Yes.
Latch onto them because they don't work in practice. Right? They're not going to be successful. Right?
And things that are specifying in the game, available in practice.
Yeah, I think you're right. And we call it specifying and non-specifying relative to the full. So where it's a bit of a poor choice of terminology.
It's all specifying, but does it specify the thing you need? That's
yes.
Right. And in some ways, again, to say that you're using a non-specifying variable, it's like saying, well, it's almost unfair to call it. It's almost unfair to call it a non-specifying variable. It couldn't possibly specify the thing you're interested in because it couldn't possibly be the kind of thing that
wouldn't work then, right? You'd fail every time in practice, right? You wouldn't get across
specifying the because the transfer requirement's different.
Yes.
But that's the law rank. It couldn't possibly be any other way.
Yeah.
And that's why your visual experience is the way that it is. Like that's, again, right, for the entire history that we've covered in this book, it's never occurred to anybody that you're allowed to have a lawful basis for visual perception. It's all been cues or sensations or hints of some kind that needed enrichment of some form. And the notion that the raw material of visual perception could be in and of itself sufficient is a game changer, right?
Yes.
It also puts a huge burden on us as ecological psychologists. This is a thing I fret about. We've got some toy examples of information.
Yes.
I think we owe the world a bit more.
Yeah.
I think
that's been a concern of mine too, Andrew. Like
everyone
got super excited about Tau. Wow, this is a great example. And focus of expansion. We haven't had a ton of great examples since then.
No,
those ones are really sexy ones, right?
But
I can perceive when an object is going to hit me without knowing how big it is or how fast it's going. That sounds amazing. Yeah.
Look, I do information in the context of coordinated rhythmic movement, but it's a kiddie pool example. That's why I do it. It's like it's simple enough for me to understand. and there's there's some global optic flow stuff to do with flow and things that Bill Warren's done at Fajan, and Jeff Bingham again as well has done some various variables on various things. So there is work out there, but there isn't enough. And I actually think I do fret that the field has got to a point where we talk a good game.
Yeah.
We just don't quite have the details to back that up. We've got some examples, and we've got some reasons to think that it's true. We've got some examples to demonstrate that we're on the right track, which is fine. But I just think it's time.
I agree with you. Yeah.
So
where's all the information? Where is it? Yeah.
If there's any mathematicians out there who understand,
that's the problem. It takes quite a skill set to be able to
talk to us. We desperately need that help, right?
Like David Lee was great at it. If you want to look for David Lee, he has his whole paper on the original Tau paper in 1976.
Yeah.
There's tons of other informational things from optic flow and driving.
This
James Cutting, perception with an eye for motion.
Yeah.
Somewhere. It has a whole book on
Bill Warren.
So it takes a certain skill set to be able to do it. You have to be fairly mathematically inclined, understand.
Yeah, there's some nice research being done at Heartbreak, actually, and I'm sure in other places, looking at horse rider dyads, where they're measuring the horse and rider basically interaction, initially starting to look at whether in phase, out of phase, or how they're operating over a jump, and showing there's Raphael Baby's just finished doing, she's just about to do her PhD fiber, and then she said she'll publish some stuff, and showing that the way, so it's that haptic information and the way the body of the rider is responding to the haptic information. There's a couple of different attractor states and how they change depending on responding to the movement of the horse and the effectivities of the rider. So riders who are stiff, for example, in the hips might do something. So they're starting to have a look at something now, some really nice stuff that I think it's very early days, and then into it.
No, it's the initial stage you have to do first. You have to understand the relevant dynamics first before you can talk about the information. There's an order of the
and we'd be remiss, right? We've got to talk about this guy had a lot of work on information, right? And
dynamic touch.
Answer. The problem is it's not like Tau is a simple thing for people to understand. Focus of expansion. This is his work on like inertia and stuff is very hard.
10 seconds haptic info, yes.
People.
I read
it's still good. Yeah.
Because Tau's a really good example of a specifying higher order information variable. It's a good example for teaching, but it's a rubbish example in actuality.
I think it's poor for a few different reasons. I don't like it because it actually allows for prediction too.
Oh, absolutely.
That's what always bothers me about Tau. Like Tau actually allows you to predict the actual time to contact, right?
Yes.
Which is confusing to a lot of people, right? Whereas bearing angle or focus, it doesn't predict. Like I guess focus of expansion predicts where you can hit, right, in the future.
Absolutely.
Whereas bearing angle and optical acceleration are relationships between you and they don't predict. You can't predict anything. You can't predict where the ball is land based on its optical acceleration. All you can do is predict. What you can do is control your current future, right? That you'll be in the same place when it does land. So, but we're getting well. So, all right. Well, let's wrap it up there, guys, before we get into a whole other discussion.
We've encountered the good stuff before.
We're getting excited now because we're.
You can tell we're in the in the chapters. We're excited about that.
No more slogging through Descartes.
Silences.
Perceiving how to get about among things is next. That's an interesting title. And what's the next one?
Brilliant.
Mechanical basis for getting about among things.
That gets into my into my as well. Nice.
So thank you for your patience. You've been waiting for us to get to this point. Finally, you can tell this is all we're getting excited now. But I think it did pay off. I like how I appreciated how he drawed back, talking about impredicativity or whatever that word is, and talking about mind-body dualism and how we. So I think it was worth it.
It's definitely made me feel more confident about position rather than just
people appreciate our relational versus dispositional affordance discussion. That's always a hot one. But Okay, guys, well, thanks to everyone for joining us, and we'll wrap it up there. Let me end this, guys.